Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, July the 30th, 2025. Today I want to talk a little bit about the European Union because there has recently been a trade deal. Ursula von der Leyen, she went to Scotland to meet Trump. Remember, she is the president of the European Commission, and they had an agreement, and many people regard this agreement as being humiliating for Europe. Europe has agreed to accept 15% tariffs on its goods being exported to the US, and some goods are still going to be higher. I think aluminium, for example, is at 25%, and as far as the US is concerned, well, it doesn't have to pay anything. It seems to be a great deal for Donald. He seems to have done well here, and it does seem a bit unfair. On the surface, it appears that there is a disparity, that Europe is exporting more to the US and the US is sending to Europe, but this excludes certain sort of financial and digital services. When you include that, in fact, the trade between the European Union and the US is fairly balanced. So there is this question, why or how did Ursula von der Leyen get such a bad deal? I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer that question, but I'm going to be looking at some relevant charts later in the video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, July the 30th, 2025. And here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So the moon is in Libra, 17 degrees 21 Libra today, Wednesday, July the 30th at noon, New York time. So you will notice, or you might notice, that the moon is edging into the Via Combusta. So the Via Combusta is that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And, with the moon in the Via Combusta, it can be a time of heightened instability where things could just go wrong, or at the very least it might not go to plan. So, with the moon moving into the Via Combusta, it's always a good idea to have a standby plan. You mustn't assume that everything is going to just work like clockwork and that no adjustments need to be made. And the moon in Libra makes two aspects, two main aspects at least. It makes a sextile to Mercury and it makes a square to Jupiter. And those aspects possibly are going to be stronger at the beginning of the day, certainly in the Americas. And so the moon in Libra sextile Mercury, it facilitates good communication. It's not a very emotional sextile, but at least we can say what's on our mind. And then moon squared Jupiter, it's a somewhat indulgent influence, but I'm not convinced it's going to be of huge importance. And some of us might take things too far, or we might get overexcited about something, or maybe spend too much money. I don't think it's necessarily going to break the bank, but it's an aspect that we might want to be aware of. Though probably the most important aspect of the day is a semi-square between Mercury and Mars. So Mercury is at 10 degrees Leo. Mars is at 25 degrees 29 Virgo. So Mercury semi-square Mars, that does mean that there could be aggravation and agitation. Mercury is how we communicate. It's what we want to say. And with the semi-square to Mars, we might want to say things with a certain amount of power and conviction. And if we don't get our way, we we might want to pursue the point. And Mercury is not just about what we say, it's also about what we think. And so there could be sort of agitations there. Remember, Mars is in Virgo. So Mars in Virgo can be a bit obsessive. And so once we decide something is important, whether or not it actually is important, that's really kind of beside the point. Once we decide something is important, we may find ourselves throwing sort of huge amounts of energy at it, and we might not know when to stop. So that is the broad picture. One other thing about Mercury is that it is changing decile. I don't want to say much about it, but you can see that Mercury is at 10 degrees. It's at 10 degrees or 10 degrees Leo. So if you divide a sign up into 3 parts, so it's Mercury is moving out of the central decile of Leo, from 10 degrees Leo until 20 degrees Leo, and it's moving into the first decile. So there might be a change. Not necessarily, a huge change, but just a slight sort of change of emphasis as Mercury moves from one decile to another. And so that is the viewpoint from the perspective of New York. If we take the view of Sydney, Australia, not a lot of difference. The moon is still in Libra, 10 degrees 19 Libra. The Via Combusta influence is not going to come about until sort of late in the evening if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So worrying about the moon in the Via Combusta, I don't think that's something you have to do today. That's more about tomorrow. But should you ever have to worry about the Via Combusta? Possibly not. Remember that the moon is in the Via Combusta every month. It's a pretty regular event. And one thing I should say about today, and not just about Sydney, Australia, but in general, what is happening today, something I didn't mention, and it relates to Saturn. Now, Saturn is exactly on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. Exactly, it's there. I've been tracking it as it's been getting closer and closer to the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, but now it's right there, and you can kind of see this by eye. There is Uranus in Gemini, early Gemini, Pluto in early Aquarius, and Saturn is halfway there. Saturn sextiles Pluto, sextile Uranus, and if you look it up, it's exactly on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And so with Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, it does represent real tension. Uranus-Pluto is about looking for change. We want dramatic change. We want something to happen, but it's all being held back. And to give you an objective view of Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, here's what Reinhold Ebertin said in his book Combination of Stellar Influences. He said about Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, let me just find it. He said, one-sidedness, self-will, egoism, stubbornness, hatred, exposure to extremely great pressure by others, separation caused through force majeure. So that gives us an idea about this. It's possibly not a trivial event, Saturn on Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And when you bring it together with Mercury square Mars, sorry, not Mercury square, Mercury semi-square Mars, it does indicate that today could be tense. And of course, we've got the moon moving into the Via Combusta. So there aren't very many aspects today. It's a bit light on aspects, but some of the aspects we do have, particularly Mercury semi-square Mars, Saturn on Uranus-Pluto midpoint, could be quite significant in terms of their influence. So was turning to the heliocentric view. Here it is, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be. We've talked about Mercury semi-square Mars and some of the aggravation it might bring. And Mercury is also sort of emphasized here. I mean, we do have a sort of conjunction between the Earth, Mercury, and Pluto. So Mercury is moving from a conjunction of Pluto to a conjunction of the Earth. So Mercury on the Earth-Pluto midpoint. We do want to say stuff. We want to be heard, and we want people to listen. And okay, if it's not us, it's someone else. So there's something that everyone wants to hear, and there are people who can be quite obsessed about it. That is the nature of an Earth-Pluto conjunction, and so Mercury is expressing that tension. So when you listen to people, listen hard. What are they showing? What kind of impatience are they demonstrating? Do they want action? Do they want attention? What is it? What's it all about? So that's something that we really should be thinking about. Additionally, the Earth is still quincunx Jupiter. I mean, it's moving away from that quincunx, but you can see Jupiter's at 6 degrees 25 Cancer, Earth is at 7:45 Aquarius, so it's not quite there, but that still gives an impression of excessiveness, wanting to push things a bit further. And then Mars is opposition Chiron. Mars is moving towards that opposition of Chiron, and I don't know how important that is, but Mars is how we're trying to assert ourselves. We want attention. A lot of people want attention. That's the nature of Chiron. Chiron wants to do things differently and wants to be quite unique. And if we don't feel that we're getting the opportunity to be unique or to express our individuality, then we might get frustrated and we might feel that we have to really push things further. And that sort of links up with the geocentric conjunction that Saturn has with the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So that's what's going on in a general sense. And now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, July the 30th, 2025. Aries, you might feel agitated today. You might find it difficult to relax. You would like to relax. You would like to be able to do your own thing, to not have to worry about what other people are saying or doing, but somehow it's difficult. And it could be that you're still feeling the influence of Mars in Virgo, even Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo, and you have had Mars, your ruler, in this sign for some time. It is actually starting to move into the last 5 degrees of Virgo. So Mars is not going to be in Virgo forever. But while it's there, there are things that you're taking seriously, which you probably shouldn't be taking seriously. That they're not that important. But with Mars making a semi-square to Mercury, you might decide to make them important, and it might be quite difficult to hide your real feelings. And if things aren't going your way, if things aren't going to plan, you could get agitated. And so Aries, you need to think about what fundamentally are you agitated about. And I would take the view that fundamentally, you're an Aries. You want to be able to do what you like, and you want to be able to be free to enjoy yourself, to be creative, however you please. And for some reason, you see a threat to that. It may be that you feel that other people are in your way, or you might feel that you're in your own way. And that is possible. And so you have all these ideas, things you would like to do, but you're tripping up over things which on the surface might seem to be someone else's problem, someone else messing you up, but perhaps at some level they're just something of your own creation. And rather than get annoyed, you should just accept that not everything is easy. Some things do require a bit of effort, and blaming other people is not going to be helpful, regardless of whether it's their fault. And looking at other people in general today, I don't think they're going to be especially helpful. When I say other people, I'm not necessarily talking about people you're very close to, but just the people you meet through the day. They're not going to be useful, especially useful. It might feel that they're holding you back, and you might want to blame them if things aren't going too well for you, but what's the point? So perhaps you should try to do things in your own way, on your own, and additionally, take responsibility. Now, the moon is still in Libra, and the moon is in your opposite sign, so that would indicate to me that you don't necessarily have to completely ignore other people. There are some people that are worth paying attention to, probably the kind of people you know well, and you can pay attention to them without having to expend any great deal of effort. Just be aware of the interpersonal dimension, but don't take it too seriously. And with Mercury semi-square Mars, if there's something bothering you, in most cases it's probably best to keep it to yourself, at least in the short term. Taurus, don't forget, Taurus, that Venus, your ruler, is getting ready to change sign. It's going to be in Cancer, very, very soon, and it's already in the last degree of Gemini, preparing for that changeover. When exactly it happens, it changes sign. Well, I make it at 4:57 tomorrow, Thursday. So that means if you're in the Americas, then this evening Venus will change sign, move into Cancer. So if you're up late, then you might notice a transition, and probably quite a fortunate transition. I think that Venus moving into Cancer, the same sign as Jupiter, is going to be good. But for the moment, it is a time when many Taurians might feel that they're neither one place nor the other. You're getting ready for a change, and under those circumstances, do you have to make up your mind about anything? Possibly not. Though Venus in that last degree of Gemini, it might be a time to sort of look back at the past. Remembering we've also got Mercury going retrograde. Mercury is still going retrograde, and so with that, considering the past, considering maybe you've missed some stuff out, you haven't fully paid attention to something, and I'm thinking especially of money. Is there anything financial that you've forgotten about? Maybe you've forgotten to pay a bill, or maybe someone owes you some money, and it would be a good idea to make it clear you want that money back. If you wait until after Venus has moved out of Gemini, it might not be so easy. So if there's something you feel that's owed to you, then do make this clear, and don't get too worked up about some of your feelings, some of your sensations, and perhaps your perceptions about the future. I think I may have mentioned this yesterday, but many Taurians do have a negative streak right now, which could border on the fatalistic. Having this view that in the end it's not going to work out, that we can enjoy ourselves, but where's it all going? What is the point? It all comes to nothing, and nothing. And yet Taurians do have a fatalism to them. It's a very earthy fatalism. You can see this. The most obvious example is Shakespeare. Shakespeare just saw life as being something very temporary. All the world's a stage, and talking about the sound and the fury, and we get really excited about something and furious about something, and then it's all nothing. In the end, we're just going to die. So there is a Taurian pessimism there. Shakespeare seems to express it, very well, and maybe you, at the moment, you might be sort of channeling your inner Shakespeare in terms of that fatalism, and asking yourself, what is the point? You can get excited about something, but it's all going to end. And right now, there might be particular things that you are especially negative about, and you have to ask yourself what is going on. And what you don't want is your own negativity to spoil something. Or you could just create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't think it's going to work, therefore it doesn't work. And additionally, you may be especially affected by what you read about sort of disasters and death and destruction, and that just may all seem to be part of the condition in which we're living. So Taurus, it's good that you're realistic and down to earth, but you don't have to be fatalistic. And if you do find yourself being fatalistic, just regard it as being a passing phase. And I think that once Venus has changed sign, has moved into Cancer, which could happen as early as this evening if you're in the Americas, then I think that you're going to feel that things are really a lot better. Gemini, don't get too annoyed about anything. It's really just not worth it. But Geminis do have an active mind, and there are always things that you're turning over. You're trying to work out what is your next move, what is the next step, what could get in your way. And so don't allow yourself to get annoyed, and don't allow your annoyedness to filter through into your own actions. And ask yourself, are you perhaps taking things too seriously? And the danger would be if you're putting a lot of focus into one thing. Every Gemini does have an obsessive streak. You think of Gemini as being sort of a flexible sign that can move from one thing to another. One thing doesn't work, you move on to something else. But Geminis have an active mind, and once they start thinking about something, it can be difficult to stop. And once they start obsessing about something, it can be difficult to stop. And that might be one issue happening today with Mercury making this 45-degree aspect to Mars, and you can't stop. And also, you might find it difficult to hide. You can't stop and you can't hide. So hiding your inner mental machinations may be hard work, and you might think that you're keeping things to yourself, but sometimes your tension can be very obvious. and people are picking up on it. So don't think you can be secretive. And so the question is, what do you do about it? Now, you could talk about the way you feel, and that might work, because you're just expressing your frustrations and maybe your anger, but it depends how you do it. If you just get angry with someone, that's not the right approach. If, on the other hand, you tell someone that you're feeling really annoyed and frustrated and obsessed, and you do it like that, then that is more constructive. And perhaps you should be focusing not on the things that you are obsessing about, but on the obsessions themselves. So why are you obsessed? Why are you worrying about something that possibly shouldn't be worried about? Now, these worries can take many forms. And by the way, I'm not suggesting you do be worried. If you're not feeling worried, if you're not feeling bothered, if you're not feeling agitated, that's great. You're probably a Gemini of a sort of an elevated level, perhaps more elevated for me. I've got my sun in Gemini, of course, and I'm always obsessing about something, but that's just me, maybe, or maybe it's the fact that my sun in Gemini is square Pluto in Virgo, and my Pluto is in the 6th house. Could be. And so Gemini, the area that you do perhaps have to watch is your home, and what's going on in your home, how you relate to your family, if you have family around you, and just the whole experience of being in a domestic environment, it could be annoying, and it just could be limiting. So that's one thing going on today. But I'm not saying it's going to be a bad day, by the way. Absolutely not. I mean, the moon is in Libra. Moon Libra. It's a great place for the moon to be. It's a placement that is linked with your fundamental talents, and while the moon is here, be yourself, and if things don't entirely work to plan, don't worry about it. Okay, the moon is in the Via Combustor, so you might be trying to do something, trying to get something off the ground, trying to show, maybe you want to show people how wonderful you are, and something might go wrong, or there might be a cancellation or a change of plan. It's easy to get annoyed, but you don't have to get annoyed. You just remember you're a Gemini, and you can move from one thing to another. You can do with relative ease. And one final point, Gemini, don't forget that Venus is about to leave your sign. Now, I don't know how Venus has worked for you. Venus has been in Gemini, for the last few weeks, and having Venus in Gemini, in theory, should have been a good thing. I think it should have been a time where you could have presented yourself very well, and in general, you should have been relatively popular. And while Venus is still in Gemini, and that means today, you perhaps have a chance to talk to people, ingratiate yourself with them, and just be pleasant, friendly, sociable, and perhaps you can even see something through. Maybe you're getting close to someone, you're developing a relationship with someone, and with Venus in the last degree of Gemini, maybe now is a time when you can make some real moves to establish that relationship, or perhaps move it to the next phase. I mean, that is a possibility, and if you want to make the most of today, just don't be too obsessed, and just try to enjoy things in a sort of easy and sort of relaxed kind of way. But it may be difficult, because that Mercury semi-square Mars, it could be quite a distraction. Cancer. I think that today is not going to be especially exciting. I think that there's not a huge amount happening, and you therefore, Cancer, you probably have quite a lot of freedom. So if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it. If you do want to do it, you can. Don't necessarily expect any support, any encouragement. It's that kind of day. You can you can look after yourself and do things or not do things according to your own sort of likes and dislikes and general disposition. And probably the sort of more active part of the day is going to be the early part. The moon is making a sextile to Mercury, and it's making a square to Jupiter. Now, as far as that moon sextile Mercury is concerned, it's not an especially strong aspect. I think you could feel its influence throughout the day if you made a real effort. And moon sextile Mercury, it's a good aspect for looking after your own interests, but you have to make the effort. If you have to take advantage of that sextile. So if you want to gently push what is important to you, if for example, Cancer, you feel that something is owed to you, then maybe you can broach the subject, not in an especially sort of aggressive or assertive way, but just bring it up. And I think that if you're easygoing and relaxed about it, you should get quite a sympathetic response. Also, the moon is square Jupiter. So moon in Libra square Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, in Cancer in your sign. And I know it's a square, but I think that this moon square Jupiter could, very well, work for you. It's an aspect which allows you to articulate to yourself a vision of harmony, and you kind of know that it's not quite there. There are still imperfections. There are still things which are out of sync with each other. And with that moon square Jupiter, perhaps you can move towards creating the kind of balance that you're looking for. And you're looking at something that is fundamental, that does relate to your own home and your own well-being. It's not an aspect that should be encouraging you to sort of make big moves. The big moves. They can wait. I don't think that there's any great hurry here. Now, finally, with relationships, that moon sextile Mercury is good for communicating. It's good for having conversations. So if something needs to be talked about, then today, especially at the beginning of the day, that's something you can do. Though you might be aware that a couple of people are under pressure or seem to be bothered about something. And why I'm saying that is it's to do with the condition of Saturn. Saturn at the moment is it's sextile Pluto, it's sextile Uranus, and we have got Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And so that could say something about the other person. And some people are annoyed, they are feeling pressured, and they want something to happen, but they're not quite sure what they need to do. And you can be aware of that, you can observe, but Cancer, it's very important that you don't participate in another person's tension. You don't allow it to be dumped upon you. And maybe some people are of the view that if they're feeling tense, then you should be feeling tense as well. But you don't have to play that game. And if you want to be independent, and particularly emotionally independent today, then you can be. So do make sure that your boundaries are in good condition, and don't allow anyone to sort of dump their annoyances onto you. Leo. Well, the sun is, of course, still moving through your sign, and I hope you're able to sort of take advantage of that. It's pretty early in the sign, so you've got sort of 3 weeks left of it. And additionally, the moon and the sun still have a sextile relationship to one another. I mean, it's not an exact sextile, but we've got the moon in Libra and the sun in Leo, so there is a sextile connection between those two signs. And so it can be a time when you are feeling relaxed and at one with everything, and you're helped also by the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Mercury. And so with moon sextile Mercury, I don't think that you'll have any problems talking, telling people how you feel, and presenting people with the real you. There's no need to hide, and you can be quite assertive in your own way, and that's especially in a social sense. So if you want to get someone's attention, then you can just talk to them and show some energy and enthusiasm, and I think that will be that will be greatly appreciated. And don't think that you have to be in any one place for longer than you want to be. So Leo, if you find yourself getting bored somewhere, then you can just move on, and it really shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, if there is a problem today, it might relate to money, and the reason I say that is because Mercury is making a semi-square to Mars, and this Mercury-Mars semi-square is an agitating influence, and it's about having thoughts which just keep going. They keep, you can get into a spiral of annoyance, and so once you start to stray into sort of financial areas, then things might quickly sort of become tense. So if you're trying to raise a financial subject, or someone else talks about money, someone owes someone money, or someone believes that the financial situation should be better, or someone's not pulling their weight, or whatever it is, as soon as the financial topic comes up, that could be when the problems start. And so I would probably suggest, Leo, that if you possibly can, that you avoid financial subjects, because I'm not convinced that a great deal is going to be achieved. There'll be a lot of talk, there could be a lot of anger, but is there going to be a resolution? Today, there's not going to be a resolution, I don't believe. And it's better to just accept the kind of day we're in. The moon is in Libra. The moon is all about harmony and its balance. Yeah, the moon might be in the Via Combusta, so there could be a few things going on that you hadn't necessarily planned for, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And so just don't try to make sort of huge commitments, or don't start fights, especially if money's involved, because it will be difficult to find a resolution. Virgo, at the moment you are in a kind of a slightly weird sort of state of mind. you're trying to be reasonable. As always. Virgo is, a reasonable sign. It tries to be reasonable. It tries to be logical, and the problem is, or at least one problem there is that Mercury is making a semi-square to Mars. And, we do have to look at what Mercury is doing if we're talking about the Virgo horoscope. And so Virgo represents you, it's semi-square Mars, and so that does mean, Virgo, that there could be things going on that you really find to be, quite annoying, really sort of aggravating, and you're not quite sure, where this annoyance comes from. And at the same time, you want to tell everyone how you feel, but on the other hand, wheeling out your true feelings could be hard work. Part of you, would like to just keep things to yourself. I mean, Mercury, after all, is in Leo. It is retrograde. Mercury is moving to a conjunction of the Sun. So really, Mercury is not in good shape at the moment. I'd love to tell you otherwise, but it's not. Leo, it's not the best sign for Mercury to be in. It's retrograde, and it's making a conjunction to the Sun, and it's semi-square, semi-square Mars. So if you're feeling tense, agitated, perhaps you should be looking for a way to sort of work it off. That might be meditation. It could be taking a lot of exercise, though, be careful about exercise. In the Northern Hemisphere, it's hot. At least it's getting hot here, so you don't want to kill yourself or exhaust yourself taking exercise. But, if exercise is appropriate and it's in keeping with your own standard of health, then that's fine. But you don't want to get caught up with just all this sort of energy flying around. You don't know how to use it, and you could just feel frustrated. And some Virgons could end up having quite dark thoughts, thoughts that things aren't going anywhere, that things are reaching the end, and what's beyond the end. I mean, you don't even want to know what's beyond the end. There may be something, but is it going to be better from the current situation? And so you kind of feel that if there is change, it's not necessarily going to be change for the better. And one reason why you might feel that a change is in the offing is because Venus is in the last degree of Gemini. And Venus has been in Gemini for some time, and Gemini is a sign which can be connected with your ambitions, at least in terms of a Virgo chart. And with Venus getting ready to move into Cancer, some Virgons may be asking themselves, well, what have you achieved? Have you achieved enough? And you might sort of reach conclusions which could be wrong. You could underestimate your achievements, or you've done things, but you're yet to see the full consequences. I mean, I'm talking about the full sort of favourable consequences. And when Venus moves into Cancer, you can look at things in a different way. You can be not quite so focused on specific achievements, what you have achieved, what you haven't achieved, but it can be more about your aspirations. And when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, Thursday, this is certainly something I will be looking at. Libra, don't forget, Venus is on the verge of moving into Cancer. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then late this evening, it's possible, very late this evening. Maybe not quite so late if you're in Alaska or Hawaii, but Venus will be changing sign and moving into Cancer. And I do regard Venus moving into Cancer for you as being something which is entirely favourable. But I don't want to go into too much detail about that now, because right now Venus is still in Gemini, is in the last degree of Gemini, and so with Venus in the last degree of Gemini, you may not be too certain about how things are going to work out, and there could be some hesitation on your part. You're just not ready to do certain things, and if you do want to hesitate, not take the plunge, that's probably the right approach. Why would you want to take the plunge? Especially if you don't have all the information. There are still things to learn, and you can't second guess a new situation. That new situation is, of course, Venus in Cancer, and we can speculate about what it means for Venus to be in Cancer, but we're not going to know until you're there. And maybe tomorrow you're going to start to see things. Tomorrow, Thursday, you might start to see things in a different way. And don't take things too seriously today. Some Librans today might be quite pessimistic. You might be aware, or feel that you're aware, of all the things that could go wrong, badly wrong perhaps, and there might be a tendency to think that of all the things that could happen, the very worst thing is going to occur. Of course, that's not true, but you do have to observe your own negativity, and you just make sure that it doesn't get out of hand. And your negativity can take many forms. It can be in terms of what you say. Now Libra as a sign likes to usually be quite sort of accommodating and doesn't want to rock the boat, but right now you just might be tempted to say something that is unexpectedly negative, certainly to think something that is unexpectedly negative. But again, don't worry, things are about to change. Plus the moon is moving through your sign, and that moon moving through your sign means that you have a good understanding of what's happening around you. You are quite sensitive. That always is likely with the moon in your own sign. So you just do pick up on things. And what might you be picking up on things? You might be picking up on other people's negativity, and you might be owning it, regarding it as your negativity. But that would be unnecessary. And while the moon is moving through Libra, it does make two aspects. It does make a sextile to Mercury, and it makes a square to Jupiter. Now, moon sextile Mercury does indicate that if you're feeling uncertain about something, if you're feeling unsure, then it might help to talk about it. People are prepared to listen, and sometimes if you keep something to yourself, you allow your fears to build up. It just it's going to reach a sort of real sort of crescendo state. But if you just talk about it to someone, not even for very long, that can just make things feel a whole lot better. Additionally, moon is making a square to Jupiter, and it might be that moon square Jupiter is a reminder of what things could be like in the near future. Even if you dismiss the possibility, that moon square Jupiter does give you a streak of optimism. It's a streak of optimism that finds it that is always feeling really isolated. It's isolated optimism. It could be like some rare animal that's trying to function in a hostile world, and it's trying to hide, trying to use its camouflage. It doesn't want to get noticed, but it's still very much there. And so it is optimism under pressure, but it is real, and in fact it represents the future. It's not some animal that is about to get extinct. It's actually an animal that has just arrived on the scene. And when Venus does move into Cancer and starts to make a conjunction to Jupiter, which is something to really look forward to over the next few weeks, you'll see that that optimism, wasn't just naive; it was very real. And if you make the most of it, and you provide an environment where this animal can flourish, then you can flourish as well. Scorpio. Possibly the main aspect of the day is a semi-square between Mercury and Mars. And of course, Mars is your ruler, and Mercury is a planet of communication. It's a planet of thought. And so, what happens when you've got Mercury and Mars in semi-square to one another? Now, one way of looking at it, if we want to be positive, then we say, well, Mercury is making a contact to Mars. Mars is influenced by Mercury, and this could be a time when your ideas start to sort of move into top gear, when you start to think about what is possible. And you might also find that there's a lot to say, and you might not be entirely happy about expressing your views and your opinions, but if you see the opportunity, then probably you should go for it. And so think about your mind, think about what you've got to say, and just give yourself the opportunity. But Mercury is semi-square. Semi-square, you could say, is not necessarily an especially fortunate aspect, and Mercury might represent an irritation. And the question is, how do you deal with that irritation? You want things to be done in a particular way. You've got your ideas about how you want to function, and then something comes along and bothers you. So what is it? I mean, it could be that something just occurs to you. You thought you had everything sorted out, and you were ready to do A, B, and C, whatever you were planning on doing today, and then you realize you've missed something, or something just imposes itself on you, and like it or not, you have to take it seriously. Well, in fact, you don't like it at all. You get quite annoyed about it. So that's one manifestation. If you are with other people, especially if you're at work or there's some hierarchical setup where you have to listen to what another person is saying, you have to take them seriously, you even might have to do what you're told. You might be asked to do something that you just don't want to do. And it's tempting to sort of dig in and refuse, but I don't think that's what you will do. So there's a possibility that you do something in a way that is very begrudging. You have to do it, so you just go and do it. And that means that you might have to watch out for, what's the phrase? Is it sort of unconscious determinism? Something like that. Your unconscious annoyance might impinge on your conscious actions. So you do something because you don't want to do it, and unconsciously that resentment feeds through and you make a complete mess of it, deliberately, at an unconscious level. So Scorpio, if you're going to do anything today, make sure you do a good job. If you're asked to do something that you don't want to do, then just consider the possibility that you might mess it up. And it might then be better if you just put it on hold. So if someone asks you to do something, then maybe you should wait until tomorrow, or even the day after. Does it really have to be done today? Because it's a day when you want to do things your way, and So the question is, how do you deal with outside pressure? And it's not going to be easy. I mean, outside pressure. Well, other people right now, well, like yesterday, I think I mentioned this yesterday. Other people are not going to be really on your wavelength, and you're not necessarily going to enjoy everyone's company. The people you meet in a sort of a casual way, the people you have to meet, it's going to be a pain. If you ask for anything, there's a good chance it might be denied to you, or you might be also disappointed by other people's attitude. So, this might be a very good reason, Scorpio, as I think I said yesterday, to be doing things, in your own way, and not feeling that you have to give in to outside pressure. Though, when it comes to relationships, do make some effort to understand. When I'd say relationships, I'm thinking particularly of close relationships. Do make an effort to understand, what another person is experiencing, and don't take anyone's words and promises at face value, because things can change. So what someone agrees to do today, they might not agree to do tomorrow, because they feel that circumstances have changed. And additionally, you might be perplexed by another person's negativity. You kind of weren't expecting it, but it could be there. And don't be put off if another person is confused or negative, or thinks that everything is falling apart. It's a temporary state, and I do think overall, Scorpio, that tomorrow is going to be a better day. Not just for you, but for everyone else. Sagittarius, a day when you can be quietly sociable. Might seem a bit of a contradiction. The Sagittarius might have a reputation for being wild, for being all over the place, but you're not really in the mood for that. You want to take things easy, but you will enjoy other people's company. And so see what is available, but don't pressurize yourself, and certainly don't allow anyone else to pressurize you. And Sagittarius, you will be quite effective when it comes to talking. You can talk about most things, and you're going to probably try to avoid anything that is too complicated, and you shouldn't be looking for any resolutions, or if you, for example, a complicated situation that's been perhaps hanging over the last couple of days or weeks, it's not going to suddenly resolve today. It's not about necessarily forcing things through, though there could be moments over the course of the day in your social life, when you're with other people, when things happen very quickly in a very concentrated period of time, perhaps in like a 5-minute period. Suddenly things really happen quickly, and you may have a chance to take the initiative, but these moments could be fleeting, and you're going to have to really act quickly. And then there is the question is are you going to be able to act quickly? And additionally, when you're looking at all of the people around you, different people have different priorities and different states of mind, and not everyone is going to be cool, calm, and collected. Some people are going to be agitated. I mean, that's very likely because we have a semi-square between Mercury and Mars, and so you try your hardest to get on with people and to be nice, but some people are agitated, and they may get agitated about things which seem unnecessary. They decide to take things seriously which you can't take seriously. So, what do? Well, you could just, go along with it and, attempt to sort of take an interest. But, we're living in difficult times. Sometimes it's not enough to be neutral. People get into all sorts of trouble just for not having an opinion or for not mentioning something. You didn't mention Palestine in your last video. What kind of person are you? I mean, I'm just using Palestine as an example. It seems it's very difficult to be in the middle and try to be objective. And you move. If you're not on the extreme, then at least if you're on the extreme, you're going to get some people to like what you're saying. But if you're in the middle, maybe you just don't please anyone. And there is pressure to have opinions, even if you have no opinions whatsoever. And so, perhaps you have to, be diplomatic in certain situations. And part of the problem is this fact that we've got this semi-square between Mercury and Mars. It just makes some people sort of agitated. That Mercury square Mars, semi-square Mars, might in certain cases say something about what's happening at work. If you're going into work today, someone could be a workmate, could be an employee or employer, depends on your status, is annoyed about something, probably unreasonably annoyed about something, and it could potentially spoil the day, make things more difficult than they should be. So, what do you do, Sagittarius? Well, overall today, just as I've perhaps already suggested, just try to be diplomatic and try to sort of, take each person, as they are. And, as I said at the beginning, it's about trying to gently socialize. And maybe that's enough, but not everyone is in the mood for a gentle approach, and some people just feel that they have to express their opinion, and they assume that you're going to have the same opinions as they do, which is not necessarily very reasonable. Capricorn, you're trying your hardest to make progress. You know that there are things that need to be worked on, but the question is, is now the right time to be expecting huge results? There may just be a certain sort of a lack of application. It's not your fault, but it's just there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to really get your teeth into. So, however hard you try, however motivated you are, it might nonetheless be quite difficult to make an impression. And so if you don't get the results you're looking for, then don't be disappointed, and most importantly, don't be frustrated. One aspect we do have today is a conjunction that Saturn has with the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. Saturn is exactly on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. Saturn is your ruler, and so with Saturn on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, it's possible, Capricorn, that you take a lot of things very seriously. You feel that something has to happen. It's now or never, and you could be very frustrated if things don't work your way. And what you have to do is accept the situation, and perhaps also take control of it. So if you really feel that you want something to happen, then at least in the first instance, it's down to you to make it happen, or at least try to make it happen. You can't necessarily assume that other people are just going to be there for you, that they're going to drop everything, that they have the same priorities as you, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. And it might be better then, Capricorn, to be quite sort of modest in your ambitions. You certainly can make some progress today. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to get off the ground, you can be successful up to a point. But even then, things might just happen. You'd expected things to happen in one way, and they could just happen in another way, and that might be just further evidence that things are a bit tough, and that you're being delayed, perhaps delayed at every turn. But again, don't take it too seriously, and at the same time, be sympathetic to other people and their idiosyncrasies, and other people have their own ways of working, and at the moment they might not necessarily be in the mood. But if you show some sort of acceptance of other people and what other people are going through, I think that that would be appreciated. And I should additionally point out that Venus is about to change sign. Today, Venus is in the last degree of Cancer. Sorry, last degree of Gemini. And with Venus in the last degree of Gemini, you know that something is changing if you're honest with yourself. But the change hasn't happened yet. And if you're feeling frustrated that some of your ambitions are not coming through, that you can't get them together, it may be connected with the fact that Venus is in the last degree of Gemini. You're waiting for a change. And when Venus does change sign, when it moves into Cancer, I believe, Capricorn, that things should be easier. And as far as other people are concerned, I think that you're going to get more cooperation. And I'll be talking about Venus in Cancer tomorrow, Thursday. So don't worry. It's things are getting better. Aquarius. Saturn is on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. It's conjunct the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, and I think this is an important event, and I think that this is an important event if you're an Aquarius. And Saturn is a slow-moving planet, but it's been drifting towards the exact midpoint, and today it's on that exact midpoint. And it's something that is quite easy to see. There's Saturn, your ruler, in Aries, and it's making a sextile to Pluto, and it's making a sextile to Uranus, and of course Uranus and Pluto are in sextile to one another. And right now Saturn is halfway between the sextile to Uranus and the sextile to Pluto, and so that says something about how you perceive yourself and what you should be doing. And it might be that many Aquarians feel that it's time for a big change, a sort of a Uranus-Pluto kind of change. Even if you're not into midpoints, Saturn is sextile Pluto, sextile Uranus. We can't avoid that, and so you're not happy with the way things are, and you probably think that you're not going to get anywhere through gradual change. Gradual change never really comes to anything, and that might be also to do with the fact that you're a fixed sign. Fixed signs, fixed signs are not about sort of bending; they're about breaking. Something has to break. You need to do something dramatic in order to move things forward. And so Aquarius, do think about it. How much do you want change, and what are you prepared to do, and what are you prepared to risk. And additionally, we shouldn't forget that Saturn is now in Aries. It's still in Aries. Okay, it's going retrograde. It will eventually go back into Pisces temporarily. But with Saturn in Aries, Aries is not necessarily the greatest place for Saturn to be in, because Saturn is fallen in Aries, and there could be moments of frustration, Aquarius, and because you want things to change, but you can't change them. Perhaps people don't listen, or the material world doesn't seem very sympathetic, and so it's just hard work. And this might be one reason, Aquarius, why you sort of have reached a conclusion that you can only make progress by doing something that is sudden, that is dramatic, that maybe sort of breaks something. You think of shattered concrete blocks. That's how you do it. You don't sort of slowly chip away at things. That's not the way you want to do it. So, if you do want to create change, how would you go about it? It could be that you don't need to use physical force. Probably doesn't require physical force. It may be about something you say. You say something dramatic, or you write something dramatic, and it immediately has an impact, and it sort of creates ripples, and one thing leads to another. So, Aquarius, I'm not telling you how to create change. I'm not even saying that change indeed has to be enacted. But if you feel that something has to shift, and you're in a hurry for this shift, then just consider the possibility that you have to do something that is unexpected, that other people aren't aware of. And there is a value in shock. If you do something that no one was expecting, then they don't know how to respond, they haven't worked out a strategy, and you may be able to get a sudden advantage. So now that's sort of quite a big concept, and it's not necessarily about today. I mean, it's just a Wednesday, isn't it? It's just one Wednesday in 2025. We can't expect you to have a revolution in one day, but today might just be the epicenter of a process, and you're now sort of getting hints about what needs to be done, and maybe we should be looking at other things as far as timing is concerned. I mean, for example, Mercury is retrograde. It's often said that trying to do stuff when Mercury is retrograde and all of that, that often doesn't work out. But on a more sort of day-to-day level, we've got the moon in Libra, and moon in Libra, it's a great place for the moon to be. It's kind of making a sextile to Mercury, and so in spite of what you might feel deep down, you're quite good at sort of giving a good account of yourself, talking about stuff, and you perhaps should be looking for a different perspective. When you get annoyed, when you get frustrated, when you think that there's only one way of doing things, maybe you should be open to alternative views. And with the moon in Libra, I think there's a real possibility that those alternative views are around, and it may just be about talking to someone, listening to another person's perspective, and that might create create a change, and you might just see that something is possible, that you can do something dramatic, and at the same time you don't have to make a big fuss about it. You don't have to regard it as being anything heavy and dramatic, and maybe it can be something spontaneous and organic. Pisces, you are feeling that you should perhaps be rather sort of slow and non-committal. It's not necessarily a time when you should be, making up your mind, and you don't want to. Still, there could be moments today when you do have a chance to be definite, and The moments may be difficult to predict. When other people are at a loss, when something happens, and this is especially the case if you're with other people and there's a juncture where you move from one stage to another. Someone new comes into the room, or something just happens that no one was expecting. At those moments, you are perhaps at an advantage, and you have an opportunity to do something, to say something, to perhaps just express yourself and make suggestions. So when you make suggestions at the right time, there'll be no counter suggestions, and you could almost to your surprise get your way. So in general, Pisces, it's a day when you probably need to sort of keep a fairly low profile. You don't have to push yourself, you don't have to push your agenda, but you just need to be ready. And because you don't want to miss the moments, because I think the moments might just crop up, but they'll crop up from nowhere. And as far as relationships are concerned, one aspect we do have is a semi-square between Mercury and Mars. So remember, Mars is still in Virgo. So, Virgo is your opposite sign, and that may say something about other people, the people around you, and how they're behaving. And Mars in Virgo does indicate that other people have not always behaved themselves properly. They may not always have been sympathetic. They may have been rather obsessed with what's important to them. And with Mercury semi-square Mars, it might just set things off, and you might be surprised by other people's behavior and their reactions, and there may be things that they are taking rather too seriously, or at least they appear to be taking it rather too seriously. And that seriousness might relate to the way things are done. Now, as a Pisces, at least if you're a traditional Pisces, you have a certain flexibility to you. You know that there are different ways of doing things. You don't always have fixed plans, and you're quite sort of easygoing very often. But this is in contrast with the way some people are looking at the world, and they just might want things done in a particular way. They might have rituals and routines that they are quite obsessed about, and if anyone does things differently, then they could get annoyed. And so Pisces, the question is, what do you do? Do you challenge people? Do you say, when you don't necessarily need to do things this way, you don't need to be obsessed? Or do you just say, well, that's the way people are. If someone wants things done in a particular way, well, then you might as well do it, because it just makes things easier. And I suspect that is the right approach. And don't worry, Pisces. Things are getting easier, things are getting better, because Venus is about to change signs. Venus has been in Gemini for quite a long time, a few weeks, and now it's getting ready to move into Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. Cancer is a sign that is very sympathetic to your sign. And in fact, if you're in the Americas, then this evening you might feel Venus moving into Cancer, because right at the end of the evening, Venus goes into Cancer, and that might bring about a change, and I don't think a change for the good. But by tomorrow, all of us are going to be able to experience Venus in Cancer, and if you're a Pisces, I think that's going to create sort of new opportunities. And don't forget, Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter, your ruler. So from a Pisces perspective, I'm very optimistic about Venus's sign change. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 45, gathering together. So this hexagram is very sociable. It almost implies that you have to have people around you to make the most of it. So think about all the people around you and how can you interact with them. Even if you are on your own, you should probably make the effort to interact. So if you haven't talked to someone for a long time, maybe you should get in touch if you can. And gathering together doesn't imply just one person. It seems to imply several people, a group of people. And so the possibility here is that if you want to make the most of today, ideally you will do it not just on your own, but you will have people around you. Now what would that mean if you were to be on your own? Well, you would still be in a position where you can gather things together. You can gather your resources together. That's one thing you can do. You can gather the memories of other people together. People are real, even if you haven't seen them for decades. They have their own personalities. They have you can still have conversations with them, and you can still be inspired by them, and you can think about the lessons you might have learnt from them in the past. And so perhaps you can imagine yourself with other people and ask yourself, how would they respond to the situation you're currently in? Because they might have a view. That memory might have a view. So that is a possibility here. With gathering together. Now we do have two moving lines. The third line from the bottom moves, and also the fifth line moves as well. Now with the third line, it's certainly true that we want to gather people around us. I think we can benefit from that, but it may not be too easy. Even if we are in a group of people, we might still feel, at least to begin with, rather isolated. We're not quite with it. We're not at the heart of things. Other people, they've already formed their own relationships and connections, and to begin with, we could start to feel that we are an outsider. So that is a possibility, and even if we don't feel an outsider, that desire to be with others is just not going to be easy. That first contact is not going to be easy, and we may, to begin with, take the view that things are not especially welcoming, and there could be an underlying negativity there. But I don't think that this is going to last so very long. It's certainly worth persevering, because the fifth line moves as well, and the fifth line is about the ability to gather people around you, and also to ask who is in control. That is an important question. Who is the leader? Your first impulse might be to take the view that someone else is the leader, someone else is controlling things. You're gathering around another strong person, but maybe you're the leader. So who is it? And so do work on how to bring yourself together with others, and don't be put off if to begin with there are a few setbacks. Now we've got two moving lines, so we have a second hexagram, and so what this all moves to is hexagram number 62, preponderance of the small. This hexagram is coming up quite a lot recently, and with the preponderance of the small, it's good to be with other people. It's good to enjoy their support and perhaps also give them our support, but don't expect things to change overnight. Preponderance of the small there is a limit to what people can offer. It's good they're able to offer something. It's certainly better for nothing, but still, we shouldn't have too many expectations, and perhaps that's the key to getting on well with other people. Not having expectations, not wanting something from them. We shouldn't see it in a transactional way, but being with the right group of people can certainly be stabilizing for us, and can allow us to make some small gains, and maybe they're going to become larger gains at a later stage. But this hexagram is really only about today. I mean, this reading is only about today, and now I want to consider the European Union. And so we had this trade deal on Sunday. Trump went to his golf course in Scotland, and he talked to Ursula von der Leyen, and general consensus seems to be that she humiliated herself. She just gave in, and it was a bad deal. I think that is a general consensus in Europe. Not just a bad deal, but perhaps a humiliating deal. And Europe, at least in the form of Ursula von der Leyen, really wasn't able to stand up to the United States. Perhaps it felt it couldn't take the risk. It felt it needed the United States, for its own security reasons. But this deal seems to be very sort of lopsided. The US charging 15% on European tariff of 15% on European goods. Europe not charging 15% on the other side, and Europe could have, or Ursula von der Leyen could have made a greater effort to assert herself, to assert Europe's interests. For example, there are a lot of financial and digital services which the US is effectively exporting to Europe, which were not taken into consideration. There could have been a tariff on that. So the reality is that trade between these two countries is actually quite balanced, but it's just a rather one-sided view of it. And so, Ursula von der Leyen appears to have sort of got Europe a bad deal. And so, as far as the meeting itself is concerned, I mean, here was the trade meeting. I'm not convinced. I'm sorry. I'm not saying for sure that's the exact time it did start. It was supposed to start at 4:30. Now you'll notice that I put in Glasgow. Now it's not Glasgow. I've set the coordinates for his golf course or wherever they met, but I had to start off by putting in the Glasgow coordinates or some UK town, and then I had to manually change the longitude and latitude to fit the place where the meeting was. So, here is the chart. If we go for 4:30, first thing to point out is Mercury is retrograde. So we all know about Mercury is retrograde. When Mercury goes retrograde, things aren't necessarily as clear as they seem, and additionally, Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of the Sun. So this indicates that people weren't necessarily thinking straight. Things were being hidden, and there just may have been an obsession with getting this thing done. And at a later stage, when Mercury is in a better condition, perhaps people in Europe will be having another look at it. Although there are, different views. There is a view that this trade deal it doesn't actually mean very much. It talks about the supplies of liquefied natural gas. Was it something like $750 billion worth of natural gas over the next 3 years? But the question is, is the US ever going to be able to export that? And it just may not be quite as dramatic as it seems, and that may reflect the fact that Mercury is in a really awful condition. And on the plus side, you can see why there was an agreement, because when it happened, the moon was making a sextile to Jupiter. So the moon was at 10 degrees Virgo, making a sextile to Jupiter at 10 degrees Cancer. Moon Jupiter sextiles are really good. They allow agreement to happen, and so that's that's how it all worked out. But I think that there are problems in that chart. The South Node is on the midheaven. Saturn's pretty close to the IC. Uranus is on a descendant, and if that 4:30 time is of any significance, we've got true Black Moon Lilith on the ascendant. So does this bode well for the future of this trade agreement? I mean, does it mean anything? I think we should be particularly worried about the fact that Mercury is in such a poor condition. But the general consensus does seem to be that Ursula got a very bad deal for Europe. I think I read that some people are saying that she should be called Ursula von der lying down, because she just sort of gave up and kind of humiliated Europe. So here is the horoscope of Ursula von der Leyen. I don't have a time of birth for her. It's kind of interesting that Ursula von der Leyen does not have any traditional planets in Earth signs. How grounded is she? I mean, she has sort of spent most of her life as this sort of politician, bureaucrat, Europe bureaucrat, living in the exalted corridors of Brussels. But is she really connected to what's really going on? A trade deal is quite an earthy thing, you would have thought. It's getting down to the details, and here is a woman who is she's got 3 personal planets in Libra, and no personal, not even any social planets in Earth signs. Libra can be ungrounded, and it's perhaps all about appearances, and certainly in the case of dealing with Trump, looking for harmony. Trump, of course, doesn't have any traditional planets in Earth signs either. So these two people do have a lack of Earth, and so they're not really thinking about the nitty gritty of it, I don't think. And that could be a problem. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, although we don't have her time of birth, we do know that she's got the moon in Leo, and the moon in Leo possibly conjunct Uranus. Her moon is going to be anywhere between approximately 6 Leo and 20 Leo. I mean, that's quite a big margin. But with moon in Leo, Ursula von der Leyen, she wants attention. She wants to be taken seriously. She wants people to be nice to her. She is quite proud, but fragile. This is not Sun in Leo. It's Moon in Leo. And so getting attention and appreciation really does matter to her. But again, Moon in Leo, I would regard this as being potentially quite weak. And as far as how did she get to where she got? I mean, she has a Venus-Mars trine. She has Venus in Libra, trine Mars in Gemini. So perhaps that allows her to use her charm. Some people sort of pick up on that charm, and she gets to a position where she's kind of over promoted. You get that feeling with her. I think she was at one time Minister of Defense Minister in Germany, and she didn't do a very good job, I don't think. And so Germany sort of passed her off and got rid of her by sending her to the European Union, where she is now President of the European Commission. So she's sort of has, I think, been sort of over promoted. So those are a few thoughts about her chart. I mean, she is someone who, despite everything, is really into her own power, because she's got Mars square Pluto. She's got Mars 2 degrees Gemini square Pluto in Virgo. Despite everything, she wants to be at the center of things. She likes to be in control. But in spite of liking to be in control, she didn't really show that Mars square Pluto when dealing with Trump. Maybe she just sort of got caught up in that Libra, or she was obsessed about something else. I mean, quite possibly, the problem is that Ursula and a load of others are so obsessed about Ukraine and the supposed threat of Russia to Europe and European interests that she is prepared to do anything on that non-core issue. So that Mars-Uranus square could be that obsession with Ukraine, which has allowed all other interests to be sort of subjugated to it. And so, we had to destroy the European Union to save it. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? And completely go against Europe's best interests. And so she had this meeting with Trump, and so as far as what was happening at the time of this meeting. Well, let's start with Trump first. So here's Trump, and here is how he relates to Ursula. And so Trump and Ursula. So Trump has planets in Libra, and obviously so does Ursula. So Trump has his Jupiter in Libra. Ursula von der Leyen has his Mercury in Libra, and so I wonder how that worked out. Was Trump's Jupiter in Libra sort of able to flatter her? Somehow she kind of got caught up in Trump's magnificence, his larger than life, whatever. And that sort of had an influence on the way she was thinking. And additionally, Trump was born with an incredibly wide Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So, there is his Neptune at 5 degrees Libra, and there's his Jupiter at 17, 18 Libra. And so Trump's Neptune was on Ursula von der Leyen's Venus, and his Jupiter was on her Mercury. And so Neptune on his Venus, on her Venus, maybe she just didn't know what to make of him. Maybe there was something about him, but for her, it's just confusing, and Jupiter and Mercury, and she just sort of, went along with it. So that's certainly a possibility. And look at his Pluto's. Pluto's at 10 degrees Leo on her moon. So there's something about Trump from an outer planet perspective. Not Trump as an individual. Trump as as someone born in the summer of 1946 meets Ursula, and she doesn't fully know what to make of him. And she, at the same time, I think perhaps a tragedy here. I mean, I don't know if tragedy is the right word, but Ursula didn't really understand what she could have done. And she didn't really manipulate Trump's weakness. Now, one weakness that Trump does have relates to his solar arc-directed Neptune. So Trump has his Neptune at... where's Trump's Neptune? Trump's Neptune is at 5 degrees Libra. Now, so he's 79 years old. So if we direct by solar arc direction, his solar arc directed Neptune is at around 21 Sagittarius. So he has got solar arc directed Neptune on his conjunct his moon and opposition his sun. And I do believe that this is a serious direction, and I think that this is going to weaken Trump over the next couple of years. So he's not necessarily quite as strong as he looks. I think that as far as leadership is concerned, I've suggested that Trump is not necessarily the strong leader he appears to be. That there are other influences in Washington that are possibly pushing him in particular directions. But then here is a compromised leader meeting with a leader who is even more compromised in the form of Ursula von der Leyen. And she could have done something, because Ursula von der Leyen's Saturn is at 20 degrees 43 Sagittarius. So Ursula von der Leyen has her Saturn conjunct Trump's moon and opposition his sun. And don't forget, Trump's sun-moon opposition is being hit by solar arc-directed Neptune. And she could have done something, and she could have brought him to a halt if she had not agreed. Because, we know with Trump that he starts to malfunction if he doesn't get things his way straight away. And if people who do hold some cards actually hold out against him, it can be a different picture. But she decided she wasn't going to use that Saturn. I think she could have used that Saturn. Maybe she'll use that Saturn in the future. Because there is something about Ursula von der Leyen that could have messed Trump a lot, messed Trump up. Though you can look at it in another way. When in synastry, when you've got personal planets when you've got this kind of connection, you might think, oh, it's only Trump that's going to suffer from Ursula von der Leyen's Saturn. You imagine if they were married to one another, that Saturn, you'd think would really inhibit him, really make him feel that he couldn't express himself in the way he would like. The woman could have been a real pain if, for example, they'd been married to one another. But it works both ways. Saturn represents her boundaries, the way she likes things to be. And then his full moon hits her Saturn, hits her boundaries. It just... her structure is being sort of compromised by the uncompromising way in which Trump expresses himself. And this meeting is also, of course, about the European Union. And so if we take the chart of the European Union, this is set for November the 1st, 1993. This is when the Maastricht Treaty came into being. And so, the European Union has a really spectacularly strong chart. It's got Mars conjunct Pluto opposition Moon. I think that, if one wants to be objective, this is the horoscope of a totalitarian state. As a state becomes older, more advanced, it starts to move. It starts to live its horoscope. So I think we should take Vance's criticism of the European Union very seriously, and all those planets in Scorpio. It's almost like this is this could be the chart of a serial killer, but in fact it's a chart of the European Union. Sort of echoes of Charles Manson, certainly sort of Brian Koberger in this chart, but this is the European Union. And so Mars conjunct Pluto, exactly opposition the Moon. And you could say that the European Union has already gone through its main struggle, because Uranus has been going through Taurus. So Uranus is now moving out of, has moved out of Taurus. So you could say, well, the European Union has survived Uranus going through Scorpio going through Taurus on its moon. But Uranus has certainly toughened Europe up. It's made it more totalitarian. It has, Uranus, it can be a totalitarian planet, and it's certainly toughened Europe, and it's sort of reduced, ordinary freedoms, particularly freedom of speech, getting arrested for what you say, candidates not being allowed to stand, and so on. So you could say, well, it has survived so far. So what was Europe experiencing when its leader was talking to Trump? Indeed, how does Europe relate to Trump? And one interesting thing about Trump and Europe. So if we put if I put Trump in the middle, is that Europe's moon at 24 degrees Taurus is right on Trump's midheaven, and so perhaps he's able to benefit from this situation by interacting with Europe and by putting Europe in its place. It boosts his prestige. So that's certainly one way of looking at it. Also, Trump's Mars in Leo, which Mars rising in Leo, is square the European Union's Mars-Pluto conjunction. So there is an underlying tension there, but it seems that Europe doesn't want to push it, and in the end wants to just back down. Oh, and look also at this Mars opposition Saturn. Now that Mars opposition Saturn, Trump's Mars opposition Europe's Saturn, that could manifest. It could be manifesting now, but it could also be manifesting, at a later stage. So this is not necessarily some sort of wonderful love-in between Europe and Trump. Maybe things could fall apart later, but for the moment, it seems that, as we saw with Ursula, his Mars has just smashed Europe's boundaries, self-image, and so forth in the form of that Saturn in Aquarius, and then we should be considering, what was Europe experiencing? What was the EU chart experiencing at the time of the meeting? And so we got the EU's chart in the middle, and we've got the chart of the outer wheel, and we've got the planets at that time. So what I found quite interesting was, if at that 4:30 time, Black Moon Lilith was rising at around 24-25, true Black Moon Lilith was rising at 24-25 Scorpio. And so true Black Moon Lilith was exactly conjunct Europe's Mars-Pluto conjunction at the time of this meeting. So that struck me as being kind of interesting, and it's perhaps talking about the sort of secret motives and that Mars-Pluto and the obsessions of Europe. I mean, Europe had its own obsessions, and it, as a result of Black Moon Lilith, sort of worked through them. And I would guess that it's just this continued obsession with Ukraine and Russia is encouraging Europe to undermine itself through this kind of trade agreement, because Europe seems to be desperate to keep hold of the US, and it would just basically do anything that the US says. I mean, I don't know. It's almost like a protection. Europe gives America a favourable trade deal, and then Trump will protect them, or at least he'll say he'll protect them. So that's one thought about European Union. Then there are the solar arc directions involving EU. So from a solar arc perspective, there's nothing coming up right now, but there are things coming up maybe in about 3 years time. So here, for example, is the EU's natal Saturn, and it's solar arc directed Uranus Neptune, because it was born under a Uranus Neptune conjunction in about 3 years' time, so 2028, directed Uranus-Neptune will be conjunct Europe-Saturn. So that's certainly something to be looking forward to. And Mars has already, sorry, not Mars. Because there is, of course, a Moon Mars opposition in there that's sort of there, sort of all the time. No, but I think it's a Uranus. The Uranus Neptune conjunction will be on its Saturn. Then also in 3 or 4 years' time, we've got true Black Moon Lilith is going to be conjunct Europe's moon. So that's something to look forward to then. And additionally, the aspect that we've got, right now, the closest solar arc aspect at the moment is midheaven conjunct the South Node. So in Europe's natal chart, it's got, there's the South Node and there's the midheaven. So if we direct the midheaven 30-something years, the midheaven gets to the South Node, and I think that this indicates where Europe is at the moment is that it's the South Node. It's Europe is basically doing everything it shouldn't be doing right now, and this has been happening over the last few months. So it doesn't look great for Europe, but you could say that the European Union has already had its traumas with Uranus in Taurus aspecting its Scorpio planets, but that solar arc direction. I think Uranus-Neptune solar arc directing to Europe-Saturn could be significant. But all of this requires some further thought. And one final point I wanted to make, going back to Ursula's chart. So here is Ursula's chart, and she has her Uranus at 15 degrees 28 Leo. Now, you might say, well, Uranus is a transpersonal planet. Does it matter in an individual? But this individual is president of the European Commission. So because of that, we could possibly regard that Uranus as being like a personal planet. And so that does mean that we might want to look at transits to that Uranus. And one transit we do have, or did have very recently, is Mercury stationing. So Mercury went stationary a week or two ago at 15 degrees 35 Leo. So you compare that with Ursula von der Leyen's chart. So Mercury went stationary right on her Uranus, and so maybe Mercury sort of short-circuited it. Maybe and her Uranus is quite close to the Aries point, and so this may not be about the trade agreement, but somehow Mercury really had an impact on her Uranus, and that may say something about the European Union and the shock that this has caused, because this has not gone down well in many places in Europe. I don't think the Germans are too bothered by it, but a lot of European countries, particularly the French, are unhappy about it, and so it could be a shock. And so, just because we've had this trade deal, it doesn't necessarily mean that the matter is finished. And there could be more things going on, and remember, it's going to be a long hot summer, and so we'll have to see how it works out. And hopefully I'll be looking at some of these charts again. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.